Welcome to Pure Love Season 2, Episode 2, and today's topic is nudity.
I'll start by reminiscing about my childhood involving nudity. Well, growing up, you were basically a nudist. Every time you came home, your clothes were off. You had little to nothing on at all times. But for me personally, it didn't bother me or shock me, I guess, because, since I've always seen it. It wasn't like, oh my God, I'm seeing a naked body. And because it wasn't like, it's not like you're forcing your body on me. You weren't like making me look at your body. It was just like, I'm just in my natural form. This is when I feel the most comfortable. So it wasn't like intimidating or frightening, or I don't have any negative like feelings or thoughts connected to you being naked. I feel like it definitely like, it made me more, just comfortable with other people's bodies in general. Because, like, throughout your life, you don't really pay attention to it, especially when you're younger. You're forced to be around a lot of other nudity or your own nudity in front of others, especially if you're little and you need help with the bathroom or changing or anything like that. So I guess it was like a preparation for the world. And I feel like you were doing it to help me be comfortable with my body as well. To show you what a real body looks like, not just on television, these, like, perfect bodies. Right.
So, you trying to say I don't got a perfect body?
No, you have an amazing body. But
I'm joking.
I personally think that it was a good thing for me. I think it helped a lot. Because I feel like there's a lot of fear around it.
Yeah.
And shame. So I'm glad that I didn't have that.
Yeah. I mean, growing up, I had, it's interesting because my mom, we saw her breasts, and sometimes, if she was coming out of the bathroom, I might see her butt going into her room. I think once, my mother tells me a story that once when I was maybe 2 or something, she was in the bathroom with the door open, I walked in, and she got up to wipe, and I saw all the hair, and I freaked the hell out. And it was screaming, calling it cuco, that's monster in Spanish. I was like, cuco! Oh, I was so scared. And I didn't know what that was. I didn't know that you could have hair down there. So my mother never really explained, like, nudity. It was just like, it happened in the house, and that was it. But it was only my mother. That was it. So me and my sister, girls, I go girls. Yeah, at the time we were girls. Or I was a girl. And, that was like a definite no-no. We were very, very clear that even if we wore skirts or dresses, we had to wear shorts under. And I thought all girls wore, shorts under their dresses or skirts because, it made sense. So your panties wouldn't show and all that. So my mother was really aware of this idea of strangers or, these other people possibly doing things. So just like try to make it harder. I remember one time we talked about it. She's like, this could make it harder for them because there's too much to fumble with, right? Interesting conversation to have as a kid, right? And then, having you... at that point, when I was being like naked around you, that was when I was at doing my work, my self-love and trying not to hate myself and being in therapy and all of this stuff. And that really felt good to me. But I remember checking in with you about these things because I didn't want her to feel uncomfortable at all. And I was doing it for me, and also too, I really did want you to feel like you could if you wanted to. So I would take you to these retreats, these like women's retreats and stuff, and like 75% of the people there, the women were naked all over the place, and I loved it because it was
Different
all
bodies.
colors, all bodies. I mean, from the tiniest to the biggest, and I loved all of that, and I wanted her to see that it was okay. And I remember asking you, I was like, Mandy, I said we were at the pool area, and I said, Mandy, if you want to get naked and get in the pool, you can. And she was like, no, I don't want to. And I was like, okay. And that was the end of the conversation. You were very clear that you did not want to be naked, but you felt okay with me being naked. So I'm glad that we were able to talk like that, because I think if you would have told me it makes me uncomfortable, I would have reconsidered it, because I didn't want you to be uncomfortable. But this is something obvious here. This is a different conversation here. If I were a cis male, I think this conversation would look different.
Yeah.
Right? So, unfortunately, I would say, because the naked body is a beautiful thing, and there is an epidemic of child sexual abuse in this world, and unfortunately bad things happen, and so people are afraid, and we lead with fear, and because men are at the higher end of being harm doers on sexual violence and sexual assault, we associate all of that with the penis, and the penis is a harmful thing, right? And so what if you're a dad and you have a daughter and you happen to be a nudist and you're walking around the house like nothing, no erection, no anything, just walking around the house? Then would that change? I suspect it would.
Yeah, I have to say too, like, I know I've never been around or been exposed to like a fully nude male until, I don't know, maybe middle school or older, and that's probably by accident, or I saw it in a movie or something. Mm-hmm. But like physically to see a man, like a grown man naked, I'm like, I didn't even like realize how like rare that was. Mm-hmm. And I don't like, I mean, I understand like the basis of it, but at the same time, I'm just like, that fear is just like, you're assuming that everyone is going to be a victimizer, and I hate that people project that even like to that bond that could be built with your child, because I'm just like, you don't want to go in thinking like, oh, he's going to like harm the child, or he might possibly harm the child, and being naked is like the gateway or a doorway to that. Is harmful thinking for everyone involved, because nudity is not always sexual.
Right.
It's just,
we make it that.
We make it so sexual, and I'm like, being naked is not a sexual thing at all. Like,
right, because when kids are little, a lot of times they run around naked, or they're in their diapers and stuff like that, and then they hit a certain age where you decide, okay, this is inappropriate now. So, like, I wonder how do we convey that to kids too? Like, because I'm thinking about nudity of the child. Like, right, what about diaper changing? I know diaper changing is a big topic here, because I remember when you were younger and I was still with your dad, like, my mom and other women in my family were just like clear, like, you do not let a man change a little girl's diaper. Like, it just doesn't happen. And in my family, that was, or in my immediate family, that was the case. Like, you do not let a man. And and for a long time, I didn't question that. I was like, absolutely. But it's interesting because my abuser was a female, right? And not a stranger, So it was interesting to try to grapple with these things, these ideas of the possibility of this this abuse or this harm doing or something, just because of the penis. But I understand we live in a world that's sexist and patriarchy is alive and well, and like I said before, harm doers, as we know now, tend to be predominantly cis male. So where's the balance in, if you want to raise a child that's like, feels comfortable around nudity, maybe you're a nudist, you live in a nudist colony, or you just don't want them to be afraid of it. So where do you find that balance,
Because I feel like the only times that I've heard of like anything semi-positive with a male being nude around their child is when they're teaching their sons how to pee standing up. Mm-hmm. because they wanted to show by example.
Right.
So I think that's like maybe the only time a kid might be like, oh, I saw my dad's penis.
Right.
But, you know, it's not any other context. And I'm just like, why put such a stigma on it? You're adding to this fear when a child comes into this world with no fear. No child is born like, men are predators, penises are bad, this is that, until you put that in their head. So I'm like, you
Well, not just putting it in their head, though. I mean, I understand what you're saying. It's putting it in their head, but then it's also based in something, right? So that's why I say, like, what is the...
Yeah, it's not pure fantasy, but I mean, at the same time, it's like, I don't want my child to automatically assume that because they're around nudity that has to do with men, that it's because it's going to be because of this reason.
Right.
When you can just be nude. Because I'm like, I don't remember seeing my dad without any type, like maybe without a top in the summer, but even with Boppy, barely saw him without a shirt.
Right.
So I'm like, he was just always fully dressed and prepared to be in front of people. And I know, like, with seeing you nude, you know, because being a girl, you're around more nude women.
Right.
So it wasn't such a shock for me, like, going, like, I know some kids I went to school with, they might be like, oh my god, she's naked. But for me, I was like, yeah, she's just getting changed, you know, like, it wasn't that big of a deal for me. And but I mean, I will say not a big deal, but it's something I was like, was just seeing some certain other people's, like, when I started seeing someone else that was naked besides you, that's when I was like, I'm seeing somebody else's body. But I remember, like, one of your old roommates, I remember, like, she had on, like, a long shirt with nothing under, and she was sitting a certain way, and that was, like, the first time I saw, like, a full vagina, and I was just like, because I'm like, I've only seen, like, you know, you standing up, like, like, this is your vulva, that's just the outside, but to see it, like, I was a gynecologist, I was like, wow. And then I remember one time, I don't even think I told mommy about this, one time she was coming out of the bathroom, she just took a shower, and she dropped something, so she bent over to pick something up, and I was behind her, and I just happened to walk, so I was like, oh my god! So, like, seeing a vagina from the back angle is very, like, you see everything, and I'm like, to see my grandmother's vagina, that was like, oh my god, but
oh my goodness.
I was still, like, mildly prepared, but you know, how often do you see your grandmother's vagina? So I'm just like, I was just like, oh my god, okay, I just saw that.
That reminds me that I actually saw my dad naked once by mistake, and he was so angry. Oh, he was so angry. It was just like the fire in him, because
he was probably embarrassed.
I walked in on the bathroom. He didn't lock the door, and I saw it, and I was like, "Oh my god!" And he was just so embarrassed and so angry. And I was so confused by it, right? So again, I keep going to this balance, right? Because, like, for me, I think the conversation would be less about the nudity and more about what privacy is and what feels comfortable and trusting your gut, right? So if you were to tell me, you know, like, or me asking, because I did ask you, you know, like, oh, that makes me feel funny, or can you, you know, I would have changed that behavior because we live in a house together, right? And I would have taken that into consideration and used that as a teachable moment for you negotiating with me, or you know, like you saying, I don't like that, I don't want to see it, and I'm like, I respect what you're telling me, and you don't have to see that. Right, and these are the conversations I talk about in terms of, like, from birth to crossing over, how we talk to our kids about sexuality, which includes, of course, nudity, and negotiation and boundary setting, right? So, like, what are the boundaries? Like, when we see our little children masturbating, because they do, and it's totally natural, what do? Scream at them and hit them and tell them that that's bad? Or do you say it's a private matter and teach them about that they can, you know, go to their room and do that in private? And also kind of discussing what the difference between privacy and secrecy is, right? So those are two different things. So to me, I think it's another opportunity for a deeper discussion to get back in. But I guess we really have to, like, be real here, that I would suspect that people would have a much more of a problem a cis man, being naked in front of a girl, right? Probably less in front of a boy. Maybe sameness is more acceptable, right? A girl and her mother, or and a boy and his father is more acceptable than the other way around, right? But then this conversation gets even more interesting when you think about trans parents, right?
Who have different bodies,
right?
Yeah.
So what does that mean? Is it, I think it's absolutely beautiful and normal for your child to see that nudity, because you get to show how different everyone is, right? Like that you're a part of naked bodies, right? That you are part of the spectrum of what naked bodies look like, and that is also, a teachable moment in a lot of ways. So, yeah, I'm interested to hear what people think about this.
Yeah, what are your views on nudity?
Cis men and being naked, or cis dads being naked in front of their daughters, and what does that mean? Is it beautiful and natural because it's the human form? Is it something to be afraid of? I think it's something to build on. I think it's something to build on, and I think it's a great opportunity not to lead with fear, but to just have a deeper discussion about it. But I also know that a lot of us, that's what we got in that moment, because I was there at one point. I was there with the fear, lots of fear.
I feel like with my baby, I would, they're going to be seeing a lot of me naked anyway, with bath time, with breastfeeding, with all types of stuff. So, it's going to be different for me, but the challenge would be talking to the father to see how he would feel.
Right.
Because, depending on what the baby is born to be, how he would feel about being nude in front of our child.
Right.
Because I wonder how he would feel about that. Because everyone has different upbringings and different views on things. But I know personally I wouldn't mind, especially because I know him and I know that he is not an abuser, and he wouldn't be like flashing his penis around inappropriately around a child. I know that if he were nude, it would be because that's just the state that he's in.
Would you, even though you know this, right? Because I think a lot of people know, that, this person wouldn't hurt. Like, I knew that my, family member wouldn't hurt me, and then it happened, right? So would you consider creating or talking about it, like not just letting it happen, but like talking about it and creating whatever boundaries or concerns that may come up for you prior to nudity happening?
Yeah, I would definitely have certain boundaries, I guess, so the lines don't get blurred.
Right.
About what's appropriate and what's not. Mm-hmm. Like there are definitely going to be some lines, but because there's sometimes where I'm just like, all right, why would you do that? Mm-hmm. Like, I wouldn't recommend you like sitting my child on your bare naked lap.
Right, exactly. So that's a great boundary right there.
Like,
right?
Why would you sit with my baby on your lap like that?
Right.
But if you're just getting out the shower, you're getting changed, and you're walking around, the baby's in the room, like, it's whatever. But certain things I would definitely want to be like, that's just not necessary. The nudity isn't necessary in that context, but in other stuff, I don't want the baby to be ashamed of their body or be afraid of others' bodies as well.
Right. And in talking about bodies, I brought up trans bodies and stuff, but I also think that when we're teaching our children about body parts and what boys have and what girls have, because that's where we go, right? I mean, even hitting back on the last episode of the gender reveal, it's like, how do we raise our kids? Like, do we start them off, like, without even knowing? I do this workshop for queer parents, right? Either you're a queer parent or you're a parent who has a queer or a trans child. How do we talk in those families around sex and bodies, right? Like, do we give them what everybody else gets, and then later on when we think that they're old enough and it's age appropriate? I believe that it's age appropriate when you're teaching them about bodies, that letting them know that some little girls have vaginas and some little girls have penises, or some little people. Girls have, or some little girls or people, thank you, have outies, and some little boys or people have
innies.
No, I said it backwards. You know what I mean? Innies and outies, rather than saying penis and vaginas, right? it's a great opportunity to bring that up.
Because I mean, they start discovering their own genitals at a couple of months, a year old, like when they're just like hands on the pants all the time. So I'm like, why not? They're already trying to figure it out. They're listening. Why not explain it to them?
So, how would you talk to your child, grandchild, niece, or the
a young
child,
person in your life?
How would you talk to them about bodies and nudity, and what kind of boundaries would you create for yourself? We're curious.
Let us know.
Yeah. Thank you so much for watching this episode. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye. Hey everyone, don't forget to go to igrivera.com and fill out the survey, the Caregiver Survey. We want to hear from you about your experiences talking to young people or your children or the children that you advocate for around sex and sexuality. igrivera.com, Caregiver Survey. Pass it on.